will declare by your authority Caesarion to be king of Egypt, and we will rule together in his name.
In 1963, Hollywood witnessed one of its grandest and most chaotic productions, Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Behind its shimmering gold and lavish sets lay a story of scandal, disaster, and desperation that nearly destroyed an entire studio. This wasn't just a film. It was a legend born from ego, money, and obsession. Today, we're unearthing the untold truths, the secrets that producers fought to hide from the public eye. From record-breaking salaries and secret affairs to catastrophic set failures and financial collapse. Here are 20 shocking, bizarre, and little-known facts about Cleopatra, 1963, that reveal how one movie changed Hollywood forever. The Vatican's condemnation of the film. Cleopatra's release in 1963 was met with controversy, not for its artistry, but for its moral implications. The Vatican publicly condemned the film, denouncing Elizabeth Taylor's off-screen affair with Richard Burton as a disgrace to the sanctity of marriage. Catholic publications urged believers to boycott the movie, calling it a sin-made spectacle. Fox initially feared the backlash would destroy ticket sales, but instead, the condemnation fueled curiosity and publicity. Audiences flooded theaters to see what had caused such moral outrage. The scandal became one of the first instances where negative publicity actually boosted a film's success. Behind closed doors, the Vatican's statement was considered a direct attack on Hollywood's growing disregard for traditional morality. Yet Taylor and Burton capitalized on the scandal, appearing together at premieres and defiantly proclaiming their love. The controversy transformed Cleopatra from a film into a global event, intertwining art, religion, and scandal in a way no movie had before. The movie that almost bankrupted 20th Century Fox. Cleopatra wasn't supposed to be a financial disaster. When 20th Century Fox approved the project in 1958, the studio envisioned a modest historical drama, budgeted at just $2 million. But what followed was a perfect storm of poor planning, production chaos, and unchecked extravagance. The final bill? Over $44 million, the equivalent of nearly $400 million today, making it the most expensive film ever made at the time. The mounting costs became so severe that Fox's entire financial stability was at stake. The studio had to sell off 180 acres of its backlot, land that would later become Century City in Los Angeles. Executives were replaced, projects were canceled, and by 1961, Fox was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Even after its release, Cleopatra's box office success couldn't erase the debt. While it grossed over $57 million, the production expenses and marketing outlays devoured any profits. Industry insiders called it the film that almost killed Hollywood's golden age. The producers tried to suppress internal memos that documented the mismanagement and waste, fearing that investor confidence would collapse. But decades later, the truth became public. Cleopatra's chaos had nearly sunk an empire. Multiple directors, and complete chaos behind the scenes. If the budget problems weren't bad enough, the Cleopatra production was cursed from the start with unstable leadership. Initially, Ruben Mamoulian was hired to direct the film, but his tenure was plagued by freezing weather, constant script rewrites, and the absence of a finished screenplay. After months of filming with little progress, Mamoulian walked off the project, or rather, was forced out by studio pressure. He was replaced by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, the acclaimed director of All About Eve. Mankiewicz inherited a mess. Scenes had to be reshot, sets were torn down, and the script ballooned to more than 300 pages. He worked without a completed screenplay for months, improvising dialogue and rearranging sequences daily. At one point, the production was shut down for nearly half a year. The delays caused costs to skyrocket, and by the time cameras rolled again, Mankiewicz himself was on the verge of collapse. He eventually filmed over 120 miles of footage, more than any other film of the era. The producers later destroyed early test footage and unused reels to avoid further embarrassment. Publicly, they blamed creative differences, but privately, studio memos described it as uncontrolled madness. The turmoil was so severe that Fox considered canceling the entire movie. Elizabeth Taylor's near-death experience on set. At the height of production chaos, Cleopatra almost lost its star. In 1961, Elizabeth Taylor was filming in London when she suddenly collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital and underwent an emergency tracheotomy to save her life from a near-fatal case of pneumonia. The studio tried to suppress details of her condition, fearing that investors would panic if the press learned their million-dollar lead was near death. But paparazzi caught wind of the story. When Taylor appeared at the Academy Awards months later, her tracheotomy scar was clearly visible, a haunting reminder of how close the production came to total ruin. Filming was halted for weeks. During her recovery, the studio moved the entire production from London to Rome, citing health concerns, but also hoping for better weather and tax advantages. The new Cinecittà sets cost millions more, effectively doubling the film's expenses. Insiders claimed the producers discussed recasting Cleopatra several times, but Taylor's contract, which guaranteed her full pay regardless of completion, made firing her impossible. Instead, they waited. Her return was triumphant but fragile. Crew members recalled she struggled to breathe during long takes, yet insisted on performing elaborate scenes. What the public saw as glamour was, behind the scenes, a performance of endurance and pain, the sets and costumes that had to be built twice. One of Cleopatra's biggest hidden disasters was architectural. When filming began in London's Pinewood studios, the production team spent months constructing elaborate Egyptian palaces and temples. But the British weather refused to cooperate. Continuous rain ruined the massive outdoor sets, destroying painted backdrops, collapsing props, and delaying shoots endlessly. Worse still, the bright desert atmosphere the script demanded was impossible to recreate under London's gray skies. The footage already filmed was deemed unusable. So, after Taylor's illness forced a pause, the studio scrapped everything and rebuilt it all in Rome's Cinecittà studios. Every column, statue, and throne was reconstructed at enormous cost. The crew even imported sand from Egypt to get the perfect texture for the ground. In today's terms, this relocation cost roughly $20 million. The first set, painstakingly created by British craftsmen, was dismantled and quietly dumped to avoid press scrutiny. Studio officials forbade photography of the ruined sets, fearing investors would lose faith. The costume department faced similar tragedy. Designer Irene Sheriff had already completed hundreds of lavish costumes in London, many of which couldn't survive the humidity or were damaged beyond repair during shipment. Everything had to be remade, twice. While producers later showcased the Rome sets as grand spectacle, the waste they covered up told a different story. Cleopatra's empire was literally rebuilt from its own ashes. The scandalous affair that rocked Hollywood. Perhaps no behind-the-scenes story in cinema is as infamous as the Elizabeth Taylor-Richard Burton affair. Both stars were married, Taylor to Eddie Fisher and Burton to Sybil Williams, when sparks flew on the Cleopatra set. Their on-screen chemistry ignited into a real-life romance that scandalized the world. The affair began quietly, hidden among night shoots and rehearsals in Rome, but the paparazzi soon caught on. Tabloids printed photos of the two sharing intimate moments between takes, and international headlines exploded. The Vatican condemned their relationship as erotic vagrancy, while U.S. Congress members publicly denounced the moral decline of Hollywood. Producers panicked. The studio's publicity department worked overtime to downplay the scandal, fearing audiences would boycott the film. They even attempted to confiscate press photos and bribed photographers to suppress negatives. But it was too late. The affair became one of the biggest celebrity stories of the 20th century. Behind closed doors, executives realized something ironic. The same scandal that terrified them also made the film unmissable. Interest in Cleopatra skyrocketed. Ticket sales soared in part because people wanted to see the movie that sparked the most famous love affair in Hollywood history. What began as moral outrage turned into free publicity, and though the studio denied it for years, that forbidden romance may have saved Cleopatra from total financial ruin. The million-dollar contract that changed Hollywood. Elizabeth Taylor was already a major star when Cleopatra began production, but her contract for the role set a precedent that stunned Hollywood. After the original actress, Joan Collins, was dropped, Taylor was offered the part. Her response was famously dismissive. "I'll do it for $1 million." To everyone's surprise, 20th Century Fox agreed. Taylor became the first actor in history to receive a $1 million base salary. But that was only the beginning. Her contract also guaranteed 10% of the film's gross profits, first-class travel and accommodation for her entourage, a personal makeup team, and approval over the script, director, and costume designer. The studio also covered all medical costs during production, a clause that later proved vital after her near-fatal illness. When her illness forced a production halt, Fox still had to pay her full salary. The deal was bulletproof, and executives quickly realized they were trapped. By the time the movie wrapped, Taylor's total compensation had exceeded $7 million, equivalent to over $70 million today. The contract's consequences rippled across Hollywood. It empowered actors to demand profit participation and luxurious working conditions. Studios, once in full control of their stars, suddenly found themselves negotiating with powerful celebrities who could dictate terms. Behind the scenes, executives tried to keep the details secret, fearing a backlash from other stars. But when the figures leaked to the press, the world was shocked. Taylor's paycheck became a symbol of both excess and empowerment. Ironically, Cleopatra nearly destroyed the studio that made her the richest actress alive. The producers tried to hide the truth of how much they had paid, but by then, the damage was already public knowledge. The lost 4-hour cut that vanished. When Cleopatra premiered in 1963, it was already one of the longest films in history. But few people know that an even longer version once existed, a 6-hour director's cut that was meant to be released in 2 parts. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz had envisioned Cleopatra as a sweeping historical saga, told across 2 films, Caesar and Cleopatra, followed by Antony and Cleopatra. Each would run approximately 3 hours, allowing the complex politics and character arcs to unfold naturally. The studio initially supported this vision, but panic set in when costs spiraled out of control. Desperate to recoup losses, 20th Century Fox demanded that Mankiewicz edit both stories into one film under 4 hours. Mankiewicz protested, warning that the result would be an amputated epic. But executives refused to listen. Under pressure, he condensed months of footage into a single rushed narrative. The final theatrical cut ran 243 minutes, but Mankiewicz's complete version, nearly double that length, was never shown. After his dismissal, Fox editors continued cutting scenes without his consent. When he complained publicly, the studio retaliated by removing his name from some promotional materials. In later decades, historians and fans searched for the missing reels. Rumors persist that parts of the footage were destroyed or lost in the studio vault fire of the 1970s. What remains is scattered. Fragments, alternate takes, and incomplete audio tracks. Film preservationists have since attempted partial restorations, but the full Mankiewicz cut has never been recovered. The producers worked hard to hide the extent of the cuts, knowing critics might accuse them of butchering a masterpiece. Today, Cleopatra's missing footage stands as one of Hollywood's great lost treasures, a cinematic enigma buried by its own excess. The golden cape and 26,000 costumes. Extravagance was the film's signature, but Cleopatra took costume design to an unimaginable level. Over 26,000 costumes were created for the production, and Elizabeth Taylor alone wore 65 different outfits, each more elaborate than the last. The most iconic of all was her golden cape, worn during Cleopatra's entrance into Rome. The cape was hand-stitched from 24-karat gold thread, shimmering under the studio lights like molten sunlight. Designer Irene Sharaff described it as the heaviest garment I've ever made. It required several assistants to lift it during filming. Sharaff's designs combined ancient motifs with 1960s glamour, creating a fusion of history and high fashion that redefined cinematic opulence. The costumes cost over $194,800 to produce, the equivalent of millions today. Even Richard Burton's armor sets and extras robes were made with real fabrics imported from Egypt, India, and France. The wardrobe department became a small industry within the production, employing more than 150 seamstresses and artisans. Each piece was cataloged, fitted, and guarded around the clock. Studio officials tried to hide the true cost, fearing investors would see it as financial insanity. When the film wrapped, the costumes were quietly locked away, Decades later, some reappeared in museum exhibits, while others were auctioned for record sums. Taylor's gold cape alone fetched hundreds of thousands at a Hollywood memorabilia sale. The producers justified the extravagance as necessary to depict a queen, but behind the scenes, they knew the costume budget symbolized everything wrong with the production, ambition without restraint. The beach with landmines. When Cleopatra moved filming to Italy, the crew expected sunshine and scenic perfection. Instead, they got danger. During preparations for the movie's massive seaside sequences, production teams discovered that parts of the Anzio Beach, one of Italy's World War II battle zones, were still littered with active landmines. Engineers called in the Italian military to sweep and clear the area before filming could begin. Several weeks were lost as soldiers combed the sand with metal detectors and carefully detonated explosives. The studio tried to keep the story quiet, fearing that publicity about mines would delay permits and raise insurance costs. The shocking discovery added another layer of absurdity to an already cursed production. Crew members joked grimly that Cleopatra's army might end up losing soldiers before cameras even rolled. Despite assurances that the beach was safe, many extras refused to work near the shoreline. Some Roman soldiers in the background scenes were actually Italian servicemen who remained on site for safety supervision. When filming finally resumed, the resulting scenes looked effortless, with shimmering water and perfect sunlight. Few in the audience ever suspected the danger that had lurked beneath the sand. The incident became an industry legend, a story whispered at Hollywood parties but never officially acknowledged by Fox. Only years later did production assistants confirm what had happened, describing the tension of filming on a battlefield-turned-movie set. In the long list of Cleopatra's disasters, few moments were as bizarre or ironic as this, a film about conquest shot on a literal minefield. The studio power struggles behind Cleopatra. Behind the spectacle of Cleopatra was a brutal war for control. The film didn't just pit Antony against Caesar. It set Elizabeth Taylor against 20th Century Fox executives. Taylor, through her company MCL Productions, negotiated significant creative power. She had script approval, choice of cinematographer, and veto rights over certain crew members. Few actresses had ever wielded that level of influence. Fox executives, meanwhile, were divided. Some wanted to finish quickly and cut losses. Others, seduced by the film's grandeur, insisted it be the most magnificent picture ever made. This clash created constant tension on set. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz found himself trapped between Taylor's artistic vision and studio orders. In one memo, he wrote that he was directing two Cleopatras, one for art, one for business. At one point, executives tried to replace Mankiewicz mid-filming, but Taylor threatened to quit if he was removed. The studio backed down, unwilling to risk another shutdown. The internal battles grew so toxic that the studio's president, Spiros Skouras, was eventually forced to resign. His successor, Darryl F. Zanuck, was brought in to salvage what remained. Zanuck made drastic cuts, slashed budgets, and personally supervised the final edits. In public, Fox promoted the film as a unified artistic vision. In private, it was a battlefield of egos and power plays. Every scene represented a negotiation, every delay a struggle for dominance. By the time Cleopatra premiered, the producers were exhausted and divided. The final cut was less a film and more a peace treaty, the uneasy result of ambition colliding with control. Elizabeth Taylor's million-dollar wardrobe scandal. Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra was not just a film, it was an empire of luxury. The actress's wardrobe alone became one of the most extravagant expenses in Hollywood history. Reports indicate that over 65 costumes were created for her character, each handcrafted with real gold threads, Swarovski crystals, and fine silks imported from India and France. The total cost? Over $200,000 in 1963, equivalent to nearly $2 million today. What shocked even insiders was that Taylor's alleged insistence on approving or altering each design to her liking, delaying production for weeks. Some gowns were remade entirely to match her jewelry, which often included authentic diamonds and emeralds. According to film historian Kendra Bean, Taylor's most famous gold ceremonial gown weighed over 70 pounds, requiring assistants to help her move between takes. Studio executives were furious, but Taylor defended the wardrobe as essential to Cleopatra's aura of divine majesty. The lavish fashion became both a symbol of the film's visual splendor and a reminder of its financial recklessness. To this day, Cleopatra holds the record for the most expensive costume budget in film history. A detail 20th Century Fox tried to downplay as costs spiraled out of control. The storm that wiped out the set. Disaster struck in 1961 when a violent Mediterranean storm devastated the Cleopatra production at Cinecittà Studios in Rome. Gigantic set pieces, including full-scale replicas of ancient Alexandria, were torn apart overnight. The colossal harbor, constructed over several acres and designed to impress audiences with its realism, was completely flooded. Crews worked frantically to save props and animals, but the storm's force destroyed months of craftsmanship. Some sets were so large they couldn't be covered or dismantled in time, leaving the studio with damages estimated at over $1 million. This catastrophe forced 20th Century Fox to rebuild much of the film's Egyptian architecture from scratch, delaying production for months and adding new costs to an already bloated budget. Newspapers at the time described the scene as an archaeological tragedy in progress. The setback was so severe that executives briefly considered canceling the film altogether. Some crew members, shaken by repeated mishaps, whispered that the production was cursed. Although the storm was a natural event, its impact became emblematic of Cleopatra's chaotic and seemingly doomed creation. A film that, even before release, seemed to court disaster at every turn. The Curse of Cleopatra: Deaths, Accidents, and Omens. The filming of Cleopatra was plagued by misfortune, and whispers of a curse spread among the cast and crew. Several on-set accidents left extras injured, including falls from chariots and collapsing set pieces. Italian tabloids reported at least 2 accidental deaths among local workers during construction of the massive sets. The most dramatic incident came when Elizabeth Taylor herself nearly died of pneumonia in 1961, requiring an emergency tracheotomy. Her near-death experience shut down filming for several weeks and fed the idea that the project was cursed by the gods. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz reportedly joked that Cleopatra's ghost wants her story left untold. Even after production wrapped, more oddities followed. One extra was killed in a car crash shortly after filming, and another mysteriously vanished. Whether coincidence or consequence, these incidents cemented Cleopatra's dark reputation. The media ran with the story, framing it as Hollywood's most haunted film. Though no official record supports the idea of a curse, the production's staggering misfortunes gave audiences plenty of reason to believe something uncanny was at work behind the camera. The script rewrites that rewrote history. Cleopatra's screenplay underwent endless rewrites, each version shifting her image to fit political and cultural expectations of the early 1960s. Originally, screenwriter Sidney Buckman portrayed Cleopatra as a brilliant strategist and diplomat who used intellect over beauty to rule her empire. But after concerns that the film's tone might alienate conservative audiences, studio executives ordered massive changes. The revised script focused heavily on Cleopatra's romantic relationships, with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, turning her from a ruler into a tragic lover. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz later admitted he felt betrayed by compromise. The shift wasn't just artistic, it was political. During the Cold War, American studios avoided stories that portrayed non-Western women as powerful leaders. Cleopatra's complexity was sacrificed in favor of spectacle, transforming what could have been a feminist epic into a love story framed by empire. The rewrites also reflected Hollywood's internal struggle between art and commerce. Even though the final film dazzled visually, many critics lamented that Cleopatra, the strategist, had been lost to Cleopatra, the seductress, a casualty of studio politics and commercial fear. The secret rivalry between Taylor and Burton. Behind the glamorous facade, Cleopatra's leading stars were locked in a volatile rivalry that electrified Hollywood. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's passionate affair became a global scandal, but what most people don't know is that their on-set relationship was as competitive as it was romantic. Crew members recalled constant power struggles between the two, both vying for dominance on screen and off. Burton reportedly grew frustrated that Taylor received higher billing and pay, while Taylor resented that Burton's natural charisma often stole scenes. Arguments would erupt between takes, sometimes lasting hours, forcing Mankiewicz to halt filming. One assistant director described the set as an emotional battlefield disguised as a love story. Despite the tension, their chemistry translated into unforgettable performances, fueling both box office intrigue and tabloid mania. The press dubbed them the love affair that sank a studio. In retrospect, their rivalry mirrored the film itself, grand, consuming, and dangerously expensive. Cleopatra may have been about the fall of empires, but its real drama unfolded behind the scenes, where two stars fought not just for love, but for legacy. The uncredited heroes who saved the film. Amid the chaos, a small team of editors and technicians quietly rescued Cleopatra from total collapse. When director Joseph L. Mankiewicz was fired mid-production, Fox executives realized that the film was still incoherent. Editor Dorothy Spencer, known for her precision and discipline, was brought in to salvage what could be saved. She worked tirelessly, often sleeping at the studio, piecing together hours of scattered footage to create a coherent narrative. Production designer John DeQueer also became instrumental, reusing destroyed props and redesigning the sets under impossible deadlines. Spencer's editing shaped the final version that audiences saw, transforming disorganized reels into cinematic spectacle. Yet, her contribution was largely ignored in publicity materials. Historians later credited her with preventing Cleopatra from becoming an unwatchable disaster. The story of these unsung heroes reveals a vital truth about filmmaking. Behind every on-screen legend lies an invisible army of talent, endurance, and quiet genius. Cleopatra's Legacy, the film that changed Hollywood. Despite its chaos and cost, Cleopatra transformed Hollywood forever. It marked the end of the studio system's era of unchecked extravagance and the beginning of tighter production controls. Filmmakers began prioritizing story over spectacle, and budgets became subject to stricter oversight. Cleopatra also redefined celebrity culture. The media frenzy surrounding Taylor and Burton's affair helped invent the modern celebrity gossip industry, where private lives became public currency. For all its flaws, the film remains a technical and visual marvel, influencing costume design, set architecture, and historical epics for decades to come. Critics who once mocked its excess later acknowledged its influence on the art of cinematic grandeur. Cleopatra stands as both a warning and a wonder, a film that soared too high, fell too far, and still gleams like gold under the desert sun. The secret Cleopatra makeup formula that became a beauty industry legend. Behind Cleopatra's shimmering glamour lay a strange Hollywood secret. The film's makeup team invented an entirely new formula for Elizabeth Taylor's signature look. Her mesmerizing violet eyes, dark brows, and golden skin became an instant phenomenon. But what fans never knew was that the makeup used was a dangerous experimental blend. The cosmetic artists, led by Alberto De Rossi, mixed crushed mica, real gold dust, and chemical pigments to achieve Cleopatra's radiant glow under Technicolor lighting. The formula was so unstable that it had to be remade daily. Crew members claimed it emitted a metallic smell, and some makeup artists suffered skin irritations and dizziness from repeated exposure. Taylor herself reportedly complained that the makeup felt like wearing armor, but she refused to tone it down because it enhanced her on-screen presence. The makeup later inspired a wave of Cleopatra-themed cosmetics in the 1960s, and Taylor herself launched a perfume years later that drew from the same aesthetic. However, historians later discovered that some of the chemical components used were toxic by modern safety standards. It remains one of Hollywood's strangest beauty secrets, born from innovation, vanity, and danger. Today, collectors have been known to pay thousands for preserved jars of Cleopatra gold powder once used on set. Though many have degraded over time, they remain a glittering relic of the film's obsession with authenticity and extravagance. The real lion that terrified Elizabeth Taylor on set. One of the most bizarre yet verifiable moments during the filming of Cleopatra involved a real lion being used for a key scene. To capture the grandeur of ancient Egypt, director Joseph L. Mankiewicz insisted on live animals instead of props. During a rehearsal for Cleopatra's royal procession, handlers brought in a massive trained lion to sit beside Elizabeth Taylor's throne. But when the cameras rolled, the animal suddenly roared and lunged forward, startling everyone nearby. According to multiple reports, Taylor screamed and jumped from her seat, narrowly avoiding contact before handlers regained control. The incident caused filming to halt for hours while the shaken actress demanded that all large animals be kept at a safe distance. Crew members later recalled that the outburst wasn't scripted, and that even veteran animal trainers struggled to calm the lion afterward. The footage was never included in the final cut, but photos from production still archives confirm the lion's presence on set. This near disaster became yet another entry in Cleopatra's long list of chaotic, costly, and downright dangerous moments. In the end, Cleopatra was far more than a movie. It was a monumental gamble that nearly destroyed a studio and defined an era of excess. Behind its shimmering gold and opulent spectacle lay chaos, scandal, and ambition that bordered on madness. From near-fatal illnesses to vanishing footage and wild animals on set, the film became both a masterpiece and a warning. Decades later, it still stands as a symbol of Hollywood's obsession with grandeur and the dangerous cost of chasing immortality on screen. In every reel of Cleopatra, you can still sense the tension between beauty and ruin, a legend born from ambition, chaos, and the relentless will to be remembered forever.